This podcast is part of the Gonna Geek Network. The opinions expressed may not represent other podcasts or affiliates of Gonna Geek. Check out more podcasts at GonnaGeek.com and get ready because geekness starts in 3, 2, 1.
You come across a podcast about critically loved movies and the three geeks that test them. Your fear heightens as you notice it's October, and what was Arthouse legends becomes something darker, more sinister. You notice adult language and content and carefully guard the ears of the innocent. In the back of your mind, you know that spoilers are ahead and opt to watch the movie before journeying forward. You take one last breath of air before entering
the Arthouse of Horror.
Beware ye who enter this dreaded place as we enter Arthouse of Horror. And this time, I come as both a god and a monster. I am the MovieDude Eric, and along with me are...
This is Kent, here to remind you that knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is the scientist and not the creature, but not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster.
And this is Herr Jono Lobster. A son for the House of Lobster.
And this episode, we're discussing Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein, starring Colin Clive, Valerie Hobson, Ernest Heisinger, Elsa Lanchester, Gavin Gordon, Douglas Watson, Una O'Connor, Mae Clark, John Bowles, and Boris Karloff as the monster. Directed by James Whale on both movies. So, we are now at our first Universal monster movie. Are y'all ready to go down this hall of amazingness that Universal started? Now, there's been horror films prior to the Universal monsters, but can we say for a fact that this is the series that really kind of brought horror films to a higher level to an extent?
Yeah, I think once Dracula came out with Bela Lugosi, that really started this trend, and Universal was quick to scramble and wanted to option another horror property. This is not the first film adaptation of Frankenstein. There was, I believe, in the 19-teens, a Frankenstein serial. But this was the first Frankenstein with sound. This was the kind of cementing of the Universal horror brand. And Frankenstein itself became a long-running movie franchise that later spun off into almost B movies and then comedy. So, and you can see maybe some of those tropes and trappings in this one. But for what it's worth, I think these first two films were an attempt to deal as earnestly as possible with the subject matter, Mary Shelley's novel, to the point that it includes Shelley in the second one as a framing device.
And we'll get to that in just a little bit.
Right.
And I think that it's telling that if you pay attention to the writing credits, in the first movie, the author of the novel is credited as Mrs. Percy Shelley. So they use her husband's name as her title. And in the second film, it says based on the works of Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. So this film, I think the first one in particular, elevated her status and her novel to the icon that it is today. As much as the film is an icon, I think that the film had an effect on Mary Shelley's writing, and crediting a woman directly as the source for this inspiration, this horror, is, I think, really important. And the fact that the titular bride is in film almost as iconic as the monster itself, even though is in the film for one scene, I think is really telling. I think if you were to ask anyone on the street to name a Frankenstein film other than Frankenstein, and not one of the parodies of, say, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein or Young Frankenstein, I think they would say, well, The Bride of Frankenstein. And I think that's telling. This was, I think, the pinnacle of the universal horror. The Invisible Man, I think you can make an argument for. The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Claude motherfucking Rains!
Claude motherfucking Rains. You cannot discount him. And we had quite a discussion, I think, when it came to where we wanted to start with a universal horror, because I really was advocating for doing one, and I didn't particularly have an opinion which direction to start in, but I think the more we talked about it, and when we talked about doing the double feature, it just made sense to do Frankenstein and The Bride.
He's the most iconic of the universal horror movies. But before we go into that, Kent, I want to give you a chance to chime in.
Well, Lobster talked for so long, I lost track of what
sorry.
it was.
But no, the question is, where does the universal horror films stand in your mind when it comes to horror?
Oddly, I've never seen any of them before.
Really?
And yeah, even though they're so old, but I could tell they ingrained so hard onto the mythos of what they touch on, that even if the original source material doesn't say something, people and pop culture refer to these movies more as the definitive source, more than the original folklore behind any of the creatures or the original Mary Shelley novel for Frankenstein. I've never read the book, but I've read a bunch of synopsises about the book and how it goes, and realized that the movie, there's a plot, we'll get into more of the plot later, doesn't follow the book as well as it probably could have, but this movie is everything beyond that's happened in the 20th century dealing with Frankenstein. It's out of these two movies.
Okay, so I'm going to have a little confession here. I actually didn't watch the Frankenstein films until about 10 years ago because I had read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It was one of my first horror books, and I loved the book so much after I saw it. And I had heard that the movies didn't convey the books, and I didn't want that image of the books tainted by the movies, especially because they are so iconic. And so I had stayed away from it. Is this kind of like trying to keep this pristine image of the books specifically, because Frankenstein played a very important part in my development as a reader. And it taught, especially the format, how it was told, because it's written out in letters from a captain who's talking to Victor Frankenstein as on his deathbed, so to say, and he's retelling this event secondhand. So you're not only just getting the story, you're getting one particular perspective, but you're getting it from another perspective. So you're having like two different views of the same event. And then, of course, the ending was just so heartbreaking and impactful for me. So I didn't want to have that ruined by the movies. And it was honestly after I saw Young Frankenstein that I decided, I have to finally see this movie, because because Young Frankenstein was basic. It used the sets, it used the props from the original Frankenstein movie. And it's weird, especially if you've seen it recently and you go back to see Frankenstein, just how eerily familiar this is. And I gotta say, I saw Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein was all on the same disc when I got it from Netflix. And so, I was able to see both movies. And Roger Ebert called Bride of Frankenstein one of the greatest films ever made. And so I was kind of curious to see, what did he think about that? And I got to say, I didn't particularly follow Ebert on this particular on this film, but coming back to it, it's been 10 years since I've seen it, so I'm kind of curious as to if my opinion changes, or if I saw something more out, or if I see something now that I didn't see back then.
I mean, really, this is the story of a nice Jewish boy who gets Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Frankenstein's.
I didn't get that. Yeah, well,
I think that's a joke in Young Frankenstein, actually.
Yeah.
And then he gets guilted into getting married. Why don't you find a nice girl?
Well, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. But yeah, well, let's go over a few differences and we'll catch up. For those of you tuning in and defending where we're editing in, Eric's internet died. Oops. That was the sound of Eric's internet dying. Actually, I think that was Lobster dropping something. But, stop that. Anyway, so Lobster and I are going to go at it for a little bit.
I think.
So, okay, where do we open? We open in a cemetery.
Fire bad.
No, fire. There's no speaking to a bride of.
That's true.
Which is very interesting, but.
I love. My favorite is the obvious use of phrenology or some sort of dubious science to say, oh, this is the brain of a criminal because we see here it's all all janky.
That was big, even
right.
Well,
no.
Even,
it's phrenology or
when did they stop doing that? That was the 60s.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
So I love that it's almost a case of mistaken identity, that the wrong brain gets stolen. And so
doesn't happen in the novel.
Yeah.
It's
no.
Yeah.
It's the novel is more about just the existential horror of bringing somebody who's dead back to life. This is
and a perfectly normal quote unquote person is the creature. He is supernaturally stronger and everything, but he's I was dead, now I'm alive, and it's all from the point of view of Victor Frankenstein, not Henry, because in the movie we had to change his name to Henry for some reason. And it's his point of view going, oh, look what a bad person I was because my creation went rogue. And this is, we'll put a several weeks old brain of a criminal into a giant body and see what happens.
Well, I enjoy the cobbling together of different body parts always kind of entertain me with the whole Frankenstein mythos, in that you have pieces of different people and a blend of, I guess it's all science, right? There's really no sorcery involved.
Right. That's why Mary Shelley is considered the first modern sci-fi author.
Right.
So she kind of birthed science fiction and you could argue gothic horror at the same time, right?
Right.
Where this story
it's all about science messing with stuff. It's all about man trying to play God.
Right.
And it's all about sort of what is it to be human? What is it to be alive? What are the consequences of getting in the way of death?
The philosophy, using science and philosophy combined. Science fiction as a way to spout philosophical discussions. Gee, we've seen that before, Roddenberry, and just go from there. But yeah, you get into some very pseudoscience,
right?
And you get like, we know it couldn't have been ultraviolet. There's things beyond the spectrum of life, and you just go, we know cosmic rays exist.
Yeah. This is what started life. Well, you're not
totally wrong.
You're not
you got
completely off base. Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, there.
So to clue you in, we had started talking about the nature of the novel and the movie in terms of being science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So we had kind of been trying to base them in like
Science.
right. Like, are we
With a
talking
capital
about, is
S.
this fantasy? Is it science fiction? What exact, like, how do you place Frankenstein? And I think the consensus that we've kind of come to is that Mary Shelley wrote one of the first, if not the first, science fiction stories. Modern. Care to weigh in?
Well, I honestly think that it's that she did come from the group of writers like such as Lord Byron, who was a friend of her and Percy Shelley. There's that infamous. That infamous, I want to say it's like a 4-month stay that they had together, where some of these really crazy ideas, and I have a strange feeling that drugs played a significant part in that kind of haze. I've been hoping that someone would make some sort of like a horror movie or a reinterpretation of that event. Especially a demented, twisted ordeal kind of thing. But I don't. She's definitely one of the forefronts. She definitely evokes the same kind of romanticism and gothic nature in her work. I think that she didn't really set out to make a horror a horror book to begin with. But I also think that she definitely was interested in a very dark place in human history, in human times, in that she was looking at things, the glass darkly, so to say. And that definitely came out in the book itself. And one of the reasons why I absolutely love the book, in fact, I would say that the best time to read Frankenstein is probably around 12 to 14. Is the perfect time to pick up that book, because it will, you're just young enough to be awed by the book, while at the same time being old enough to kind of understand the deeper ramifications. To me, I feel like this was the first real teen book, the book that teenagers could pick up and really get.
So it's the first sci-fi gothic horror and first young adult novel somehow all at once.
I'll say that, in a way, maybe we should say that Frankenstein was responsible for giving us Twilight. Let's just put it that way.
It could be.
But I mean, it's got all the things from a young adult book. I mean, you have romance, you do have gothic horror, you do have this kind of isolation and torment and emo and a love triangle, and at one point it really becomes a triangle. I mean, yeah, you could really say that this thing has a YA element to it. And when it comes to the film, I gotta say that there, a lot of that does kind of play here, although it plays very differently than it would in the novel itself. So I guess let's kind of pivot to the movie, since we're here to talk about the movies.
Yes.
One thing I do want to bring up is that this was 1931. This was this was at the beginning of the talkie period, but it was also kind of on the heels of the German expressionists, especially in their horror films. Vampire comes to mind, Nosferatu comes to mind, and of course, we have Fritz Lang, which I don't know if any of y'all caught the nod to Fritz Lang in the first film with
the fact that Igor is called Fritz.
Yes. Obviously, the use of massive amounts of German expressionism in the cast, or they call it a windmill at times in a castle, and they give it all. It's the evil mad laboratory.
It almost looks like a keep that was converted into something else. So.
Yes.
maybe it functioned as a windmill for a while, and yeah.
A keep definitely, especially when you get the long shots.
I think in modern parlance you would call it a man cave, because it's clear that he could have all the comforts of home, but he chooses to sequester himself in the rustic trappings.
Well, as his dad says, he has a perfectly good house. Why is he out here in the middle of nowhere?
No, he wants to be out in his man cave with Fritz and his experiments and collecting dead body parts and things like that. He's a very he's a very special boy.
I think that I actually love how the film opens. If there's one thing I got to give it with the original Frankenstein, it opens at a really awesome place. You see this burial, and you see these mourners, and then it goes off to the side, and then you see Henry? They call him Henry Frankenstein.
Yeah.
For the film. Victor. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's that they just didn't want to. Maybe this was James Whale kind of saying, okay, we're not really going with this novel, so let's not.
I want to say
let's not fool ourselves.
In one of the notes, it's because there's somebody named Henry that was influential on him, so that's why he went Henry.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is that James Whale is a very bombastic individual, not so closeted gay man in Hollywood at a time that it was well you have quite a few gays in Hollywood at the time. It was still something that you didn't see a whole lot of. And in fact, if you ever get a chance, there's a movie called Gods and Monsters starring Ian McKellen as James Whale, who kind of talks about the period a little bit. And especially if you have a hard-on for classic films, and some of these names, it does kind of give you some inside baseball kind of things. But no, James Whale, and it's very, I don't know, y'all could pretty much feel the gay undertones, right? I mean, there are some serious undertones coming in here. Well,
let's just say he's betrothed to a very attractive lady. However, he would rather spend his time
build the perfect man.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Someday I'll make a man. No, sorry.
So I and again, like I see what you're saying. I see where the film is diverging from the novel. It's putting in a romantic kind of subplot, and there's the story of the girl who just wants to, she doesn't, it's not that she's doubting that he's doing good work. It's just, can't you come do that good work at home with, your wife or your fiance?
One thing I really kind of like about about the original Frankenstein, or another thing I like about it, is the fact that Henry has a secret. And this is a secret that he keeps well hidden from his family, from his colleagues. He's a student. He believes himself to be to have the answers that even his betters don't know. And in a way, he does. He has perfected things and is on the forefront of massive amounts of achievements with the successes that he's perfecting at this particular point. But these are secrets, and he's keeping these secrets well hidden. He is hiding. This keep out in the middle of nowhere is a good hiding spot for it. In fact, throughout the first film specifically, he does a lot of hiding. He hides bodies. He hides his intentions.
It almost takes on a farcical element where they're trying to hide the monster, and okay, you get the monster in here, and we're not gonna tell anybody, and okay, you do this, and okay, I'll sneak up behind him and stab him with the thing, and it's almost like a Weekend at Bernie's-esque thing that's happening for a little bit.
Throw the bag over him,
and then we get into Bride of Frankenstein, and it just totally becomes farce at that point.
Well, I guess for me, the struggle that I had with both movies are the dramatic shifts in tone that the movie takes. Both films end dark, like dark. And periodically between times, it goes from comedy, it goes to romance, it goes to almost like a medieval kind of epic, and then it swings wildly back around to this existential horror that I think is the definition of what Frankenstein represents. It's about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to intervene and circumvent death and become the master of death? That's all like really deep philosophical, awesome stuff. And I feel like both films miss the mark by a small margin. They almost get there. And I feel like it's because they're pandering, not pandering, but they're trying to broaden the appeal of the film to an audience that might not quite be ready. I think if we compare this film to like Metropolis, right? That's a good comparison. You were, I think, right to make that and talk about what was going on in that film. That film is very esoteric, and it goes really far into the philosophical trappings. This film flirts with them, but it never fully steps into them.
Have either one of you seen The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, out of curiosity?
I've read up on it. I've never.
I don't think I have.
When I talk about German expressionism, and Metropolis does have this, but for me, if there was a comparison that you can make with Frankenstein and German expressionism, it's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is like Dr. Seuss's nightmare. I mean, the visual aesthetics, the way that it looks, the way that the monster that you have in that movie, in comparison to Frankenstein, kind of delves into this. And in that sense, Frankenstein is a lot more progressive, because if you look at it from the monster's perspective, if you just take the monster's scenes, from the moment that he's born, just his scenes, if you put them all into one movie, it's sad. It is the saddest story of all time, because the monster, and I think that Whale, he is not really with Henry. Henry is kind of thrown upon him because you can't just tell a story about a monster. Or at least that was what the producers felt. So he really wanted to get to the monster scenes. If you look at all the monster scenes, he's dealt with such empathy and such, sadness. I mean, when he's being tortured by Fritz, and Fritz gets hung, do we feel sorry for Fritz? Do we at any point believe that the monster should be punished for this when he accidentally throws the child into the water? Do we think that he does so maliciously? No, it's misunderstanding. Yeah. And so even when we get into the Bride of Frankenstein, there's only one scene where he outright does something bad that's unexplainable, that there isn't any rationale for, and that's the scene on the rooftop, it's on the rooftop, when he throws the guy overboard. It's done so almost because, hey, I just need to kill somebody at this point. But everything else makes complete and total sense to his character, or to the fact that he's being punished, and he's, just his existence is a freak and a monster, and you're evil just for existing. And when I think of what James Whale empathizes, I think that in a way he also sees himself as a monster. Whether it's because of his sexuality or because maybe he is, interested in this kind of naughtiness, that kind of goes with horror, especially at the time, because the 30s weren't exactly known as a great time to be a horror fan. We were having this was the age when Lovecraft was really coming into thing, and let's be honest, he didn't really take off until after his time. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that quite honestly, Whale kind of saw himself as the monster. I mean, do y'all see that, or do you think that I'm off on this?
Not so much.
Well,
actually, I have background past of Kent teacher. We did the play for Frankenstein in high school.
Okay.
And I was the creature.
Ooh.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not a lot of lines to memorize, right?
Actually, a lot of lines.
No. In the book,
okay.
the monster talks.
There's whole dialogues between him and the.
Yeah. That scene with the blind man, that was actually a scene in the book, and it's a scene that Frankenstein, that the monster is telling Victor in the book, and it takes 2 or 3 chapters. He talks about his, all these travels that he does to get to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was your experience playing the monster?
Misunderstood, and yeah.
What kind of model did your high school production follow? Were you the sort of traditional, like this is the flat top bolt to the neck?
It wasn't bolt to the neck. It was makeup.
Okay.
Which started green, and then after
so you went the Robert De Niro route.
Well, by the end, we went gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, my high school me had very oily skin. For a week after, I was bone dry.
Huh.
I bet.
It was bizarre. Because I'd just be touching my own face going, wow, how did this happen?
And I can see what you're trying to get at, Eric, but I think that beyond associating either the idea of the monster with Whale or with Shelley or anyone kind of involved, I think that the broader issue is, and the line comes up in the second film, gods and monsters, right? And you mentioned it in reference to the Ian McKellen film, but the idea that you're playing God by doing what Frankenstein is doing or what Pretorius is doing. So I think that beyond associating with any one character, the kind of outsider perspective that the monster represents, human but not human, is this a tale of mankind meddling with forces it should not meddle with? Is this a cautionary tale against scientific progress? And particularly, I know that the Shelley novel came out in kind of the Victorian era that was very interested in science and ideas of, dissection and examining the body. And we see at the beginning of the film that they're trying to understand what makes someone a criminal, so they're looking at the brain and the differences there. Where does this film kind of fit? Or is it more a straight up existential horror thing? Like, is this just about like the island of Dr. Moreau? Let's scare the bejeebus out of you, but use science kind of as the modus to do it.
I think that Whale is kind of concerned about science and the realms of how far science would go irresponsibly. I think that in that realm, you could say that Frankenstein has a lot in common with Jurassic Park, where it's giving you visuals, but it's also trying to get across this kind of science without boundaries is dangerous. I think that Shelley's work is more existential. I think she was more interested in the role of God. That this was her way of questioning God in the book, which is not what the movie is going for. I think the movie is more interested in the science because, understand, there's more emphasis on science in the movie than there was in the book. In the book, he was just interested, and somehow he does it, and voila. There's no explanation. There's no, it's alive. There's nothing like that. And I have to say, I can understand why Whale is more interested and seeing the processes and getting all the doodads. And to me, I think of the It's Alive moment, both in this movie or both in Frankenstein Bride, as kind of the magician's turn. You know, it's the dazzle that Whale is giving us, so that when he gets to his more important message of how all this dazzle and frazzle has this kind of massive impact on the lives of the people involved, the lives that perhaps didn't even realize that they were involved by what happened here. They make a big deal out of the little girl. This little girl would have stayed alive had Frankenstein never done this. And how many people had been killed because of Frankenstein's actions. Now, Frankenstein never gets any comeuppance for this. I mean, I guess, he gets the elevator, down a windmill, so to say, at a time when there was no elevators. But, but he doesn't get any comeuppance. He doesn't get that moral, justified ending that he gets in the book specifically. And they kind of try to make him a hero, even though he's the one that instigates this. There's no punishment. There's no recourse.
You would have at least been up with a review board going, "You were doing what? We're going to strip your title."
Well, he dropped out of school. He's no longer.
He's not even a doctor.
Yeah. So
technically, all three of us have more education than he does.
And quite honestly, that entire village owes somebody a windmill. Just saying.
Yeah, they destroyed somebody's windmill. Yeah.
It's like,
well, and I don't think it was an integral part of their infrastructure because
it was dilapidated.
Henry was just hanging out up there doing his thing with his his
that windmill wasn't the same as the keep.
Stuff.
That was
that was a different one?
Windmill. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
because it was wooden and
the keep
was stone and
True.
It's all confusing.
Yeah, I guess for me, the connecting it to his fiance and then his father and kind of the pressure I think that he was under to carry on his name. I joked at the beginning, finally a house, a son for the house of Frankenstein. I
just find it hilarious that it's very clearly that these are Brits, even though they're supposed to be playing Austrians.
Well, right, and I was like, wait, where are we? What time? What year is this?
Are we in the Balkans? Are we in Germany? Where are we exactly?
Yeah.
I was asking myself because they never really state clearly, is this Austria? Is this Germany?
They
is this
say
Britain?
air. They say mein Herr a lot.
I think that's part of the charm of the movie. It could be anywhere in Europe.
Well,
I want to say Mary Shelley wrote this in Switzerland.
No. It was set clearly in Austria and Germany. She said that very
anywhere
clearly.
You have a Fritz,
right.
around. Frankenstein. It's a nice Jewish name, so it fits in Eastern or Central Europe. You could have, I guess, Frankenstein.
It's right next to Transylvania.
Yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing about this and Dracula is you can kind of connect them to this vaguely sinister Eastern Europe, this kind of like dark area still.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been cool to do the shared university thing.
Oh, it's
right
coming.
Here. I know it's coming in our time, but what if they had done it here and just gone?
I think they're doing like an Avengers kind of thing. Like they're doing the Wolfman, I think, is next up.
Yeah,
the Mummy is up with Tom Cruise. They want to do, I think, Benicio del Toro. Oh no, was he in the Wolfman?
Yeah, he was in the Wolfman. That's not considered part of the shared universe.
Okay.
they're
Javier Bardem.
Trying to do Frankenstein. They're trying to do a new Dracula because the soft Dracula Untold just bombed, so they're gonna have to redo that. And I think Creature from the Black Lagoon is also in talks.
Yes.
Don't
Invisible Man, though, I don't think you can do any better.
They got to bring back Claude fucking Rains. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the Chevy Chase memoirs of the Invisible Man.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah.
No?
Don't get me started.
Unless you make
I went in. I wanted to love that movie so badly, and John Carpenter directed it, and Chevy Chase was in it, and I was thinking, oh, this is gonna be great. It was first a bore, and then it was just laborious. It was.
Well,
it was
let's get
painful.
back. Let's get back to 1930s.
So I think that there's stuff going on in this first one, and again, comparing this with the second is tough. This is a shorter movie. It's an abbreviated plot, and it just kind of ends. The monster kills the girl, and then it is miraculously deduced that the monster is why the girl died.
Which doesn't... I don't quite get that, because I didn't think that many people even knew the monster existed.
Right.
Nobody...
Nobody...
The sense of this movie doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. There's a leap that's made to the torches and pitchforks that we know is part of the Frankenstein story. And so the villagers need a reason to get up in arms.
There are leaps on the moon that fall far shorter than the leaps required for this movie.
There was no one who saw him chuck the girl in the lake, which I'm like, okay, so...
And it couldn't have been that deep.
She went to the lake. She went down by the lake to play with her kitten, and...
No, she's throwing flowers in the water.
Yeah, and she's playing in the water, and she turns up drowned. And everyone's like, well, she didn't know how to swim, and she was playing by the water, but it must have been the monster that did it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no other. And I'm like, really? No. And I guess for me, okay, so we know that the monster is probably not going to be, winning any popularity contest. Like, we get it.
No, because he's scary.
Right.
He's basically a scientifically created
people fear
zombie.
what they don't understand and things like this. But at no point is there ever a, but can't you love this creature for what he is, or at least look past his hideous exterior? Maybe he's really a nice guy. He's
we see it with the blind man in the second movie. He's pretty chill. I mean,
He's, and there's a sense
fear him,
he also introduces him to smoking and drinking, which you could make another argument about that.
Hey,
however,
I just have to say though, if we didn't get that moment, we wouldn't get the awesome parody of it in Young Frankenstein.
Sure,
just saying.
And we wouldn't get the Saturday Night Live Phil Hartman as Frankenstein going, bread good.
I think that kind of the Of Mice and Men, like he's like Lenny, where he's simple-minded, he's stronger than he realizes, he doesn't quite get the whole life-death thing. And I think that's a cool thing that you can have, where he's like, well, I'm dead, but I came back to life. Why can't little girl come back to life?
Yeah.
And like that's like a neat thing that you can talk about. But this film just goes straight to the torches and pitchforks, and then that's just pretty much it. The movie just kind of ends with the windmill collapsing, and you get that little thing at the end about a son to the House of Frankenstein or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the first movie is so wacky in the sense of how it paces everything. And again, we have to remember that this is based off of an extremely popular novel that has been around for about nearly 100 years by this point. It's been adapted into plays by this point. This is the treatment that it gets from Hollywood, who has done horror films before.
Right.
Horror films are not new, but at the same time, though, this is definitely the biggest budget for a horror film that we've gotten. And it's something that I feel kind of like they didn't know exactly where they were wanting to go with this. And I think that especially considering the content, this was before the Hays Code, but at the same time, you could definitely feel like there was a hesitancy of getting deeper into this and that they were not sure exactly where to step foot. And it becomes very clear, especially when you compare it to the sequel, which, again, elaborates the humor aspects of it to try to curtain the horror parts of the film. And that they try to, in a way, it is a soft reboot. And I love the fact that they use the whole Mary Shelley telling the next part of the saga.
Yeah. Oh, what would your sequel have been? Well, let me tell you.
And I understand that the first movie had nothing to do with the damn book. Even she brings up Henry Frankenstein in her recap. It's Victor in the book. It's like an alternate universe that Mary Shelley
it's a cinematic universe.
No, it feels like this is my opinion on the beginning of the second book, or second movie. It feels like somebody wanted to write Mary Shelley fanfic, where Mary Shelley just does this story, and then at the end she self-inserts herself as the bride. It's the same actress, which somehow they didn't credit her for some
rewatching
reason.
that scene, it just fueled my desire for that horror film about Mary and Percy Shelley and Lord Byron, and I think it was like 3 or 4 others that were there in that castle for that month. The fucked up things that happen there, I want there to be. I don't care if it's accurate or if it's just batshit crazy. Just imagine these batshit crazy writers in a month isolated in this castle.
Knowing Byron, wasn't it all orgies? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It was Lord Byron.
No, there was definitely sex involved, and more than likely it was not monogamous either. I don't know if Percy and Mary were swingers. I think Percy did have a bi side to him, if I'm not correct. I could be completely wrong, so feel free to correct me on this.
Do you think that, though, setting it up that way is kind of like, well, why would you make a sequel? You killed off the monster in the last one. Like, what story is there left to tell?
I did like the beginning where she explains.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's this hidden chamber that's
No, it's not a hidden chamber. What do windmills do?
They
grind stone most of the time, grind flour most of the time, but yes, it can be used as a water pump.
Water pump.
Yeah.
So I like that. I wish that we had returned to it. Like, it was just to set it up and then forget about it.
I love that.
I kind of wanted the Princess Bride. What kind of story is this? Like, in the middle of it when so many wacky things are happening, just to have Lord Byron go
book?
Be like, is it like what kind of story is this? And Mary Shelley's like, well, okay, we gotta have something for the kids.
He was only mostly dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
There has to be somebody that does a cut of that opening. It's like, but he's dead. No, he was mostly dead.
Mostly dead.
But again, I love that opening where you have the father and the mother, the dead child, who they have to see the corpse. And the way that they did that, I gotta admit, I can understand why there's so many imitators, but I gotta give it. This did it better. Just because you just didn't see it coming, even though this was the beginning of the film. They really did a very good job. I love how the monster comes up and the mother is helping the child, her child's killer, out of the wreckage, and he kills her. It's like, damn. I mean, this entire family is dead because of this monster.
Yep. Tough. Yeah. Get back in the hole. See ya.
Yeah.
You're just like,
I will say, and this is tipping hand, minus some of the overacting in that scene with burn, whatever the one old lady says, the first couple minutes from where he crawls and comes out is probably the best part of the movie.
I love
later.
that housekeeper though.
Yeah.
It's like, part of me is like, is that Carol Kane? which going back to the
Right.
Princess Bride reference there.
Yeah.
Come on, you can see Carol Kane imitating that character in Princess Bride, right? Come on. Liar! Liar! Sorry.
I like that.
Sorry, we're talking a lot more
could
about
do it.
Princess Bride than I thought we would be in this
Well,
episode.
it's hard. It's hard with this movie or these movies because they have been so imitated
Yes.
and so they originate so many tropes that turn up in
Yes.
other stuff. So it's hard to say, okay, well, this is where we see this for the first time, but at the same by the same token, does it really do it best, or is it improved on later on?
It definitely is improved on later on.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, positively. But at the same time, it's not when it comes to watching these Universal monster movies. You're not really seeing it for just how great they are, but one thing that you got to give it is the production. The makeup for Frankenstein is amazing, even by today's standards. You can definitely tell that the likes of Rick Baker, who we talked about just a couple of episodes ago, he would take inspiration from this makeup, these prosthetics, and understand that these were painful for Boris. And he went back to this makeup time and time and time again. Bela Lugosi just had to don some fake teeth and a cape.
And look really good doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, Dracula, in my opinion, is vastly a superior film to Frankenstein in every way possible. Todd Browning is just a better filmmaker than James Whale, can't despite it. But Boris Karloff has presence in a way that I couldn't see anybody else doing this. And the fact that he was capable, the first time you do it, you have that whole kind of mysterious thing about him, which is awesome how they credit him as question mark at the beginning of the first film. But when we get into that second film and we start to see the range of what this monster is, and I don't even like calling him the monster, but he doesn't really go by any other name. You realize just how amazing an actor Boris Karloff is and how he gets these very deep emotions. He's possibly the most emotional of the monsters. He in a way, I think Frankenstein in the Universal canon is the most emotional story out there. Not to say that there are, like I said, Claude freaking Rains just did everything awesome in The Invisible Man, and I think it's a better film than Frankenstein as well. But at the same time, though, Boris Karloff had a lot to go on, and he had to be not just a visual force, but he also had to be an emotional force, considering all of the emotional elements of the film really lay on him. Colin Clive, for the life of me, is just so bombastic and so manic, and you can't really feel emotional for this guy, right? I mean, even though he has all the stakes in the movie, we really could care less as to what happens to him. Or do you? Do you feel any stakes for him? Do you feel any sympathy? Oh my God, he's not going to get married today?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like, you screwed up, man. Just
and
deal with the fact that, well, I mean, in the play I was in, I got to kill his bride. Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah, Elizabeth doesn't get. I mean, Elizabeth pays for loving Victor.
Yeah.
Henry, she just nags him. Oh my God, yeah, it's.
And
Elizabeth
after he explains his thing to her, why didn't she just go, you know what? Not into this engagement thing. Bye.
Yeah. Like,
and then when he succeeds, it should be like, you know what?
There were times that I wanted
bye.
to scream. I will admit that when I was watching it for this screening, I had a little more to drink than I was expecting, and I did at one point scream, "Don't you get it? He's gay!" Like, well, come on. I'm just putting it out there. The guy's gay. Come on. I mean, the impeccable way he dresses, the way he talks, the way that he seems to enjoy the company of men more than his fiancée, he is absolutely 100% absolutely gay. I mean, come on. That's not
like
even,
like
that's
we
not
said,
even an
he's trying to make the perfect man. He
Yeah.
is not. He is not interested in what his father wants for him.
Every time you
and
say that, I think of Frankenfurter. Just saying.
In just 7 days, what can you do? Okay.
I think for the second one, the fact that he had a domineering mentor who comes in, and I think we're kind of ready to bridge the gap between Frankenstein and Bride of.
Yeah.
Dr. Pretorius is a domineering mentor. He has a lot more fascination with physical perfection. Frankenstein is just interested in creating life and cheating death, whereas Pretorius
is vastly superior to
Pretorius is an aesthetician. He likes aesthetics. He's like, I'm going to create a princess and a king and a ballerina. Like these, like I'm interested in creating royalty and art with flesh.
His specimens are vastly superior to Henry's. It's like the only problem is that they're small. And
But it's almost
he's
comedic.
working on it. He's working
It's
on
like,
scale.
why? Yeah. I mean, hey, I would go for those small ones if I were playing God and just doing that.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Create me
like,
an army of that. Give me a nation
God,
of these tiny
so
guys.
you can like smite them if you have to, right? Like just
I
out
did-
a golf club and
Well,
deal
very
with
recently, I've
them.
been watching, because thanks to Hulu, the full moon movies are now at my disposal, and I was watching Puppet Master recently, so I did have the Puppet Master theme stuck in my head as he was pulling out the king and queen and the archbishop. I did have that theme stuck in my head, for any of you full moonies out there, but I can tell I'm not with full moonies right now.
No.
All right, I'll shut up now.
Dr. Pretorius, I was trying to I understand the root of the name sounds like Praetorian, like he is
I
a
took it as
Roman
kind of
superior.
Prometheus.
I kept thinking
it
Dr.
could be
Pretentious.
could be, yeah. I kept hearing a different word that rhymes with that I'm not going to say because
Sure.
we've been keeping this podcast amazingly clean this episode. And
I don't know what you're
Dolores.
talking about.
It's
I've been laying
Dolores.
down the.
I think that this the sequel suffers from what a lot of sequels suffer from, which is adding another character who has to compete with screen time.
Has to be crazier than Henry.
Right. You have to one up things. You have to expand the cast. You have to send the monster on kind of a road trip where he meets a wise old man. I mean, is the blind man his Yoda?
Sort of.
No, I think that the blind man. I think first off, I think Whale really wanted to get to that part of the book in the first movie, and he just didn't get a chance to. And so this was a chance for him to go back to a part of the book that he really wanted to get to. But on top of that, the thing is that he really needed to show that the monster isn't bad, and we have to understand that. That the monster does have bad qualities, and he's not without sin, but that he's relatable, so that when we get to what he does at the end of the film, it doesn't just come out of left field.
The monster is a child with no guidance.
No, he's not really a child. What he is that he is, for all intents and purposes, an innocent. An innocent can do something bad unknowingly, not without malice. When he kills the child, he didn't intend to. When with Fritz, he kills out of self-defense, not because he was intentionally wanting to murder. It was, although he did hang him. So, the fact that he was able to get a noose. But the thing is that the monster should have our sympathy. And it's important for us to understand that because of his desire for a friend, not really a mate. They don't really make it a sexual thing, so to say.
The monster demands a mate.
The scientists, I use that term loosely, are talking mate. The creature is talking friend.
Yes. I think Pretorius was wanting to mate. I think he was wanting to have that kind of. You brought up the whole aesthetics. You have a man, you have to have a woman. He has a king, he has to have a queen.
Well, it's biblical too.
Adam
God,
must have
yeah,
Eve.
right. You have to have a partner, an opposite, whatever. The
and
monster.
So now we're talking sacrilege. Now
the monster.
And
the
then
monster.
he talks about having a whole race of them, a whole species.
Right. This is going to be the start
sounds like,
of.
if you take control of them, does that mean you've created a slave race?
No, I was thinking more like the Addams Family. But
that would be the perfect thing.
At least maybe the
attitude.
Munsters, right?
The Munsters.
Herman
The
Munster
Munsters is definitely off of the Universal Monster. But I was just thinking to myself, just an odd, gooky family.
Yeah.
But I think the thing too of the monster being hideous and then wanting to create the opposite of male would be female, the opposite of hideousness is beauty, create a beautiful woman to be the counteraction to the monster. And we never get, unfortunately, the downside of The Bride of Frankenstein is we never really we barely knew you. Right?
No, we did. That's Mary.
Finally,
Mary Shelley is our
No. But we never knew you in terms of the character.
Yeah.
Well,
she's in it for a scene.
It was supposed to be Elizabeth. That's the thing that pisses me off about this. In the book, it was Elizabeth. It was supposed to be that that something was taken from Victor, or in this case Henry, and given to the monster, and that when that there was this kind of pull between these two men, and that she chooses neither. That's the important aspect of this particular thing in regards to the book. So to me, it pisses me off. And then this is part of the sequel that really pisses me off, is like, you just throw this woman in here that we just see walking down a street, and she's our corpse. I do love the fact that it's Elsa Lanchester who played Mary Shelley at the beginning of the film. And that she's become the monster in this sense, so you can have this kind of meta aspect. Since she's telling the story, she's turned herself into a monster for her own sequel. But no, to me, it's just that was that was one of the most I don't really like calling this a feminist moment in a book, but you have this woman who after being killed and is has two men clamoring for her. One, her, the love of her life. The other, the one who brought her back. They killed her and brought her back. And instead of choosing, which would be, what would be expected of her, she kills herself and, chooses neither. She makes the choice to choose neither. And you completely, in fact, the monster here, the bride, didn't even get the choice of killing herself. It was the monster that chooses death for her.
Well,
so
and let's think about it in these terms. He walks up and says, "Let's be friends." She goes, "No, go away." And he decides, I'm gonna blow the whole place up then.
Yeah. No,
I mean, that's like, what the hell? It's. I got rejected by a chick, so therefore...
Yeah, life's not worth living, right? And she shouldn't live either.
Well, neither should this mad scientist who created her.
Well, I get the mad scientist not wanting to live, and I get we're dead. We should be dead. Like, our existence is an abomination of nature. We should return the natural order and die. But again, this film, just like the first one, it misses a discussion of, so the monster was cobbled together by spare parts and was life created from kind of whole cloth. Mm-hmm. Whereas the bride was somebody who was killed and then brought back to life fairly immediately. So it's kind of like they're not the same. And And one senses, and again, this is why I lament that we never got to know the bride, although you can see the bride in the Jessica Biel's what's her name? Jennifer Biel's and Sting movie, The Bride. You can see that, which is apparently pretty terrible. But you never get to know the bride, and is the bride more connected to her humanity than the monster? It seems like she recoils from the monster the way people do. And is that why the monster is then like, oh, you're not like me because you're not attracted to my hideousness? Whereas if the bride were hideous, then that would be another thing, but the bride is beautiful, and therefore she's, repulsed by the grotesquity. You know what I mean?
The film makes it very clear that we should be kind of sexually, if not turned on by the bride, we should be understanding that she does have a sexual beauty to her.
Well, she's radiant.
Yeah.
She is presented in glowing raiments of white cloth, and her hair
discharge.
Her hair is magnificent, and she's beautiful, like physically beautiful, and she's
pure and white.
Right. And so you say that the monster is an innocent, but the monster looks like a monster. She looks like an innocent.
Well, it's misunderstood. Again, he's an innocent, but just like any emo kid, the outside doesn't match the inside.
Right. So, and I guess with the monster and the bride, we never see. She's never a bride. They're never married.
No.
I just have.
No, it's hyperbole. It's a way for them to sell the movie.
I have disappointment in this film because we never really get to see the honeymoon. We never get to I wanted more Bride and Frankie time, and we never got that. It's just like, oh well, throw the switch, and then we don't even get a scene.
Technically speaking, the Bride of Frankenstein is Elizabeth, not Elsa Lanchester.
Right. But at the beginning of the movie, they refer to the creature as Frankenstein, which is part of the reason the whole mythos gets.
We don't even get a scene at the end of this one, whereas the first one blew up the monster and then gave us a little scene at the end.
Yeah.
This is just click, boom, and end of movie. We don't even go back to the castle with Mary Shelley and Percy and Lord Byron. And have them be
they
like,
missed a great opportunity there.
And have them be like, that's fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
What? They're all like, oh, okay, yeah. On second thought, that might not be a great seller.
Tell us how you'll survive this. How Frankenstein will survive this next time.
And then they meet Abbott and Costello.
So yeah.
Well, technically speaking, that's not too far away from the truth in that sense. But in my opinion, if we had gone back to the Shelleys and Lord Byron, I have a feeling opium would have already been pulled out and someone would be naked. And I'm not going to say it was Mary that would have been naked at that point.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Lord Byron, in the middle of telling the story, has taken off his pants and is bending over, stirring the fireplace.
And
refers to something as the son of Frankenstein that isn't.
It's alive.
It's alive.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, it is live. All right.
So again, I don't want to say that both films are a complete disappointment, but I feel like in both there are missed opportunities, and I feel like I think among these films, Dracula and Frankenstein are the ones that have been remade the most. It seems like every other day there's a trailer for a new Frankenstein or Dracula movie. We got the Aaron Eckhart I Frankenstein a little bit ago.
Don't even remind me that existed.
I was flipping through cable today and saw Daniel Radcliffe and James McAvoy in Victor Frankenstein. There's TV versions. There's always a remake either being made or being pitched or something like that.
I saw a modern day YouTube version a couple years ago. What was basically Frankenstein's vlog where it's like, I have this great idea, and just is probably a better retelling closer to the original.
Right,
That would
and
be
lest
awesome.
lest we forget Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller on stage recently
Or-
as Frankenstein and the Monster.
Or lest we forget another one that was, well, technically it was given to H.P. Lovecraft, but this felt a lot more influenced by this particular movie. But a Colin Clive looking individual named Jeffrey Combs, who played the mad scientist who brought people back to life in Reanimator.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah. So and again, I feel that these are now archetypal characters. There's no there's no even very very little of this I think has to do with Mary Shelley anymore or the novel. I don't know if any of the remakes have really tried to distill the essence of the novel. I don't know if it's even something that you could do in a single movie. I don't know.
I think
but
you could try, but I don't know if people would want to see that movie.
in terms of universal horror and what those films represent, those are
that was the state-of-the-art horror. To me, I
Right.
think that the lasting legacy isn't their storytelling, but it's just the aesthetics and the visual styles of those films. It's the imagery that I think lasts long into
right. And I think the ambition of it, the ambition of we're going to make these horror movies and we're going to make them event pictures, and this is going to become a flagship of our studio. Are
this
these
is the
films?
thing that kept Universal afloat.
Yeah.
And even today, these are very closely guarded in terms of the rights of these films. They renew the rights to the films, the characters, and
What do you think Universal brings out to their theme parks every Halloween?
right. I mean, I know that things are kind of in the public domain, and I don't know really where Frankenstein stands, but NBC in the 90s was doing Frankenstein TV movies.
They're
or
still
I think
doing.
it was
Dean Koontz
House
wrote
of Frankenstein.
a TV series for Frankenstein.
Yeah. So
You could
I laud these films for their ambition and their vision. I don't know if they're quite the masterpieces that we would be led to believe, but we
All right,
can
well,
we can
it sounds
discuss
like
more
we're
of that
getting
in
close to
Verdict. But
But before we do, was there any last words that anyone wants to bring up before we get to the verdict? I don't think we have enough for Geek Sheet, unless y'all have something really good.
Not really.
I was thinking about. Do you guys watch Once Upon a Time at all?
Yes.
for
The
the first 3
doctor on that is Dr.
yeah.
Whale, and I always try to figure out why he was called Dr. Whale.
Oh, that's because of
is it-
Pinocchio.
Is it?
Yeah, because Pinocchio and the Whale.
But they also did a Frankenstein storyline
Yeah.
where they went to a parallel universe, whatever, and they did Frankenstein there.
Yeah.
That's where one of the characters learns science and
Right.
mad science.
So I was
mostly.
like, is that a reference to James Whale? I was trying to figure that out.
I
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so. But, I mean,
Okay.
it could have been that afterwards they thought, well, if we're going to bring in classic literature, we could. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah. You know,
Alright.
when
Let's-
I think this all stemmed when Frankenstein was at college and he totally misinterpreted that poster about a bodybuilding competition.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I always wanted to know what kind of student of Henry Frankenstein was. You know, you hear about how the fact that he was this genius, but is he one of those kind of guys that just like constantly, just tried to show off how he was more smarter than his teachers? You know, it's like that kind of student that just won't shut up even though he isn't half as smart as he thinks he is.
Well, he was in philosophy. Oh wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he did take philosophy classes, and did they even teach philosophy classes in medical
I mean,
school?
he didn't.
Actually, at that time, philosophy and science were very
Yeah.
closely linked.
He didn't read the label too closely when he stole the criminal brain, so
Yeah.
maybe
no,
he wasn't.
that was Fritz. Fritz.
Yeah.
Oh, Fritz.
That was,
well,
yeah. Which I don't
bummer.
understand how that later becomes Igor, but
How
that morphs in, because
you have
neither
to you have to
character
watch
is
the
original.
other Frankenstein movies to get to Igor.
Okay.
But the thing is that both Igor is kind of a combination of Frankenstein's Hunchback and the familiar for Dracula. Kind of kind of fit in between those two. All right, so are we ready to call it?
Let's
Call
do it.
them.
All right.
Let's-
Kent,
okay.
Lobster, do you agree with the critics on Frankenstein and or The Bride of Frankenstein? Do you give it a pass? Do you give it a fail? Do you give it a maybe? Or do you have some sort of mixture of them between the two movies? Kent.
I have mixture. I liked the original Frankenstein, and I think they did a lot of stuff as a movie. Right, as an adaptation, it dropped the ball. But as a movie by itself, as a standalone, for the most part, except for the occasional plot jump we discussed, I liked it. I'm giving it a pass. But Bride seemed like the almost unnecessary sequel that jumps the shark way too several times during it, and I don't see how these people laud it. I mean, I can see where some of the elements introduced in it evolve through time and throughout. Well, if you do a Frankenstein mythos, oh, that's where it comes from. Bread good, like I stated earlier. But I don't get how. I had to watch it twice just to figure out what the heck was up with it, because I just did not get it. So I have to. I'm passing Frankenstein. I'm gonna fail Bride. Shocking.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
All right.
yeah. So that's I'm split decision there for me.
Lobster.
Yeah, I will say that the first one is better in the pacing department. However, it ends really abruptly. But the second one is worse off in the pacing department, but also ends really abruptly. So neither film give the kind of satisfaction that I wanted from this story. Neither film, I felt, stuck the landing of telling a Frankenstein story. I think both films excel in that they feature Boris Karloff, who is iconic as the monster. And to a lesser extent, and though we see a lot less of her, the character design for the bride is excellent as well. So, it's good. It's a maybe overall. And I think especially as an art house of horror feature and a double feature, I don't know if this is the double feature that I would go back to for my Halloween time kicks. I don't think that there's really enough horror in either one. There's a few scary bits, and there's certainly a lot of fire and lightning, and I know that people were in mortal peril because that's real fire and real lightning. They didn't really have special effects. So it's...
And that's a real flammable set, by the way.
Yeah, that's a super flammable, yeah. And actually they had Tesla coils from Tesla, which I thought was pretty cool that they used in the film. But at the same time, I think it's just they weren't quite ready to commit all the way and trust their audience. And if you look at something like, if this had been the Metropolis of American cinema, if they had committed fully to the vision, then I think we would mention this film in the same breath as Metropolis. But it just doesn't, it does not get there. It's a maybe overall.
Okay. Well, Ken, I'm going to address you specifically first because you did bring up something quite interesting about the differences between Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. It's the same differences with The Evil Dead and The Evil Dead 2. If you really want to look at it, you're basically saying that you prefer The Evil Dead over The Evil Dead 2 in this particular perspective because it's basically the same story, just told with a little bit more of a humorous and lighthearted tone than the first. With me and Frankenstein, I'm not a fan of the story, of the way that they tell this story, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't get to this early because I'll just be honest here, I love the book. The book is vastly superior, and if you really need a good October read, read this at candlelight. And you're going to get that vibe because it's ominous and it's dark and it's grim. The thing with this movie is that the story just mangles the beauty of that story so much that I can't help but feel a little upset about that. But I got to give it the aesthetics. The set designs are amazing and they hold up even today. I mean, hell, like I said, Mel Brooks took the props and most of the set design straight from the original movie, and he was able to make not just a great spoof, but one of the great comedies of all time with that exact same stuff. The makeup on Boris Karloff is just phenomenal. Elsa Lanchester also looks incredible in this film. The actors, all the costumes look really good. The set design looks fantastic, especially for that period. But man, is it a drag at times. And there's very little in the sense of horror. It doesn't even build up any good suspense, with the exception of a couple of moments here and there. And while I do appreciate what Boris Karloff is doing in this film, and he's got so much range. It's just so sad that he was so typecasted after this that he couldn't get great roles. And so when you see him in something like Targets, which he made, I want to say like 72, 73, which you see him just... you will never see Boris Karloff the same after seeing Targets. That movie should be required viewing, in my opinion. And at some point, I do hope we will eventually get to it. Because Targets is just that damn good. But man, I feel like it's such a waste. That what should have been great was just mediocre at the very best, and outright just dumb for the most of the film. So even though I really like like a lot of the aesthetics, the best I can do is maybe the very best. And the only reason I'm not outright feeling it is because of the visual cues and the visual style of the film. You could easily hang this stuff up on your wall, and it would look great, but story just awful. So this is my second maybe for Arthouse of Horror. This isn't looking good, fellas. We got one more official in the that we got coming up, and then of course we got our super secret Halloween episode. Secret. Yes, it is a secret. But our next film is a movie that's been made more times than I think any other horror film, and that's probably including Frankenstein and Dracula themselves. This has been done at least 5 times that I know about. But we're doing one of the remakes, which is the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I'm probably going to be talking about the original, which is on Amazon Prime, by the way, if you want to give that a shot. Maybe I will talk about some of the ones that came up after this. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers feels like this feels like a great way to go out when it comes to the Arthouse of Horror lineup. So, gentlemen, I'm very thankful that you joined me on this discussion of Frankenstein, and I can't wait to see y'all again. Or is it you, but not you. This ought to be interesting.
Where did this zipper come from? I don't understand. What is there something? Oh wait, no, that's a Doctor Who reference.
Yeah,
okay,
that's a Doctor Who. Yep.
So
there's more roots, less farting.
yeah, okay, fair enough.
Okay.
All right, any last words?
Bread good.
This is MovieDude Eric.
This can't.
This is Jono Lobster. Finally, a son to the House of Lobster.
And Fiend.
Please leave us a positive review on iTunes.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
Legends Podcast is not affiliated with any other entity. The opinions stated in this podcast are strictly personal and do not represent the view of its sponsor or any other person or entity. No infringement is intended.